I think Jason's about ready. I think he's ready to get in here. So we're going to bring in State Senator Jason Pizzo. He is an amazing advocate down here. We don't have a lot of them, but he happens to be one of them.
And you know what? We've kind of gotten a little bit off. This is new for us, our program. Yep. So now that we just did our bootlicker of the week, this Jason Pizzo is our Changemaker of the week. And we were doing it, I think, more when we had candidates because it's like,
I'm adding them in. Keep going. We're singing your praises right now, my friend. We're buttering you up a little bit because obviously, yeah. Well,
you're the Changemaker of the week, so
hey, we got to do whatever we can to make sure somebody's fighting for this massive flooding problem here in South Florida. So if somebody's going to go to Tallahassee and do it, we're certainly grateful to have you. And Jason, I'm Peter. I'm Jen's former campaign manager and business partner, and we're obviously very happy to have you on this evening. So if you could introduce yourself to the audience, we've got a lot of people watching, please, by all means, floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. My name is Jason Pizzo. I'm at the tail end of a very long day. We're actually in Orlando, but I proudly back home represent 15 cities and parts of unincorporated Dade County. But I have 15 cities that start from the coast and span from the tip of South Beach and Miami Beach all the way up to the Broward County line and go west to 27th Avenue. So I have everywhere from Overtown and Liberty City, Little Haiti, through North Miami, El Portal, Biscayne Park, Miami Shores, 15 wonderful cities, wildly diverse, objectively the most diverse district in the state of Florida, which I proudly represent.
What has been
represent where I was born and grew up? I'm from North Miami. I was born in North Miami and grew up in NMB. Actually graduated from NMB class of '88. So as local as they. You're not from down here though, right?
Originally from New Jersey.
Hello.
There you go.
But my Scotch immigrant grandfather was in Miami in 1919, built a couple buildings.
Wow.
Some very old pictures with no skyline behind them. Yeah, so pretty cool. And then my dad was down here in 1959 to play football, broke his neck, and then went back. And so just serendipitously ended up back in the same place. Came down for law school. Didn't intend to practice or even take the bar, but ended up doing pretty well in criminal procedure. So I ended up becoming a prosecutor for a number of years. But I didn't go to law school until I was 31. Had newborn identical.
What year did you graduate from law school?
2010.
Okay, so you're all right. So I'm a little older.
No. We're probably the same age, but I didn't go to
law
school.
I am older than you, just not that much older than you. But I am older than you.
You got 6 years on me.
Yeah. That's it's all good. So
I did the math on your graduation date. Sorry.
Oh, did you? That's really good. I'm like very challenged. I wouldn't be able to do that.
Data is important. Math is important.
Jason, before we even jump into anything, we want to let you know that, and you've probably obviously been following Jen on social media. We have continued GenCore, which is a service organization here in South Florida. There is a nonprofit organization called Mobile School Pantry, and we're going to be volunteering with them. We're going to need some additional volunteers. There's 3 dates: Friday the 20th, Monday the 23rd, and Tuesday the 24th. There are 3 different schools we are going to be helping out with for food distribution for Thanksgiving. We know a lot of different people are going to need help. And obviously with your network, if you know anybody who happens to be in South Broward or North Dade, would potentially be looking to, lend a hand. Jen, if you can reiterate again what the schools are.
Right. So on Friday, it's at MLK, which is totally out of your district. It's in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, I mean, these are all out of your district, but and I'm surprised you asked him because there's so many people that need help for Thanksgiving. But it's
we're doing
MLK Elementary on Friday.
600 families. We have something doing next week or the week.
Exactly, he's doing. I mean, everybody has their thing, but
if you happen to know anybody who may, because again, one's in.
Where's the 23rd? Which school?
23rd is at Gulfstream Early Learning Center in Hallandale. And those are there's somewhere between the 2 and 3 o'clock hour they start, but we have all the information where people can sign up. And then on Tuesday is at West Hollywood Elementary.
Okay.
So, but if they go to Mobile School Pantry, we put the link in and people can sign up. She needs help.
mobileschoolpantry.org.com. What is it?
.org.
.org.
Yep.
Okay.
They're awesome. She's amazing. And it's just it all goes to feeding the people. There are no paid people. There's no anything. There's just Z running around frantically, trying to get.
You would love her bus, though. Her bus is absolutely adorable, and
it is a mobile
Can I contribute online?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the website's got everything, and most of our activity, I believe, yeah, and most of the activity on social media is on Facebook, from what I've seen. So,
okay.
But they definitely need. I mean, we'll be volunteering with them. It's just a question.
Unclick the comment that's covering the screen. We've asked you, we've texted you. You're not doing it.
I apologize.
There you go. Thank you. So what do we want? I mean, do you have an order of things that you want to go through, Peter? Because we had talked about some stuff.
Yes, we definitely, obviously, the top, this couldn't have been better timing from the standpoint of, obviously, everything that's going on right now. You represent an area that is really susceptible to climate change and all the things that are going on right now. This endless amount of flooding. My neighborhood in West Pembroke Pines is completely flooded. It actually caused damage to my car, unfortunately, that's getting worked on right now. And so I've been hearing a few different things. I have we have different friends and contacts that are on various city commissions throughout the area. And of course, one community is able to do one thing and others, doing something else. But what has been, I guess, the communication been like as far as with Tallahassee and, what we might be able to do down here? Because as far as I can tell, Florida, probably as much as any state, needs a massive infrastructure bill to really deal with these problems.
Having a problem.
Yeah, so I've been talking about this for a long time. It's just not really a sexy topic, because when people are campaigning for office, they want to tell you what they're going to do tomorrow and the following week, and they want to sell optimism and growth and all that stuff. And I've been talking about poop for a long time, and I don't mean to be crass there.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. But, we have what are called delegation meetings. So it's every member of the state, the state representatives and state senate, to meet with county commissioners. And then you also meet with city officials and all that. And I've been saying ad nauseum for several years now, and I put up clips recently, the Biscayne Bay fish kill that you may have seen recently kind of brought to light, the dangers of pollution and other issues going on with climate change inside of Biscayne Bay. And that freaked a lot of people out. And then it got people to sort of pay attention and say, where is this coming from? So you have people saying it was fertilizers and people saying it was septic tanks. But in Miami-Dade County especially, you've seen it in Fort Lauderdale, obviously, with multiple failings of infrastructure. It's not, so you have stormwater, which is one thing, which is obviously critical considering how little feet we are above sea level. But really, the innards, the interior, the subsurface of most of Miami-Dade County is sitting on 60-year-old clay broken pipes that don't have the use of gravity. So they basically will use pump stations. And if you have clay pipes and they break and shatter in certain places, or high water table moves them up, then they fail. And then basically the outflow goes into the bays, leaches into other areas. We have 100,000 septic tanks in Miami-Dade County. Now, wow. If you go through my district, parts of like Sunny Isles Beach, when you see these like Dubai-like skyscrapers of palatial penthouses and $50 million homes in certain sections, they're all flushing their toilets into the same broken pipes. The federal government sued Miami-Dade County many years ago, and they basically put up their arms and screamed uncle, and they came out with what's called a consent decree, which is basically an agreement between the parties to rip up, repair, and replace not only pump stations but also sewer lines. And that's supposed to be done by 2025. That's never going to happen. Now, the other issue is I can't get funding in Tallahassee to get, you've heard of the city of Miami Shores, El Portal, Biscayne Park. They're entirely on septic, and they're also, like, a lot of Miami Shores fronts the water. And so a lot of these places don't even have septic tanks, or the fields have failed, or the tanks have failed. So you're just flushing your toilet and leaching into the soil. Now, people think of sea level rise especially when I'm talking to kids, like, oh yeah, the icebergs are melting and all that. And then I explain it's not the icebergs, it's the ice shelf and all that. Yep. But it's not just the water coming over, seawalls and stuff. It's water coming up the high water table. And in some places in Miami-Dade County, the high water table comes within 6 inches of septic drainage fields, which means our aquifer basically is going to be scraping up against poop. Now, everyone just sort of like used to nod their head and say, okay, and all that stuff. Like, listen, that's what we need. We don't need, so we go up to Tallahassee 120 representatives, 40 senators. We go up and we go, hey, can we get $1 million for this pump station? There's like, 400 of them. Can we get $600,000 to do some curbing or swale work over here? That's not what we need. We need about $3.5 billion to rip up, repair, replace our infrastructure. Now, people are like, wow, that's so huge. That's so big. That's, a crazy number. It's really not. And this is the analogy to give people, the example. If you have your car that's basically now soaked in water, right? Let's say your car is worth $30,000. Would you pay $300 to have it fixed? Yeah, you're probably going to spend more, but you would pay $300 to have it fixed. You pay 1% of the cost of it. Now, if you have a $300,000 home and something goes wrong, would you pay $3,000 to have it fixed? Yes, of course. If you have $300 billion worth of commercial and residential real estate value in a county, should you spend $3 billion to protect it and its future? And I think it's a simple answer. It's just such deferred maintenance for so long from so many politicians kicking the can down the road, not wanting to pay attention, not wanting to give tough love measures, which are necessary, and artificially suppressing certain costs and things to remain politically popular, not having the political will. And here we are with deferred maintenance. We are in a really, really, really bad situation. I'm getting texts right now from my friend Laura, a constituent in North Miami, who now has to grab her kids and get out of the house tonight. And I have my aide in Tallahassee reaching out to the Public Works Department through the police chief, because in North Miami, raw sewage is coming up through her bathtub and her sinks right now, as we speak.
Yeah. Do you find that very often, and again, that is a very good segue into my second question, which is, of course, what's it like working in Tallahassee with a GOP supermajority? Do you find that very often, I kind of use this as sort of like the political litmus test, which is usually a GOPer will only act on an issue if it actually affects them personally. Do you find that most representatives kind of have that same issue where it's like, well, it's not my problem if it's not my area?
Absolutely. But that's not GOP specific. That's all. Listen, if the Democrats were in the majority, it would be the same issue.
Same deal. Same
I'm
deal.
telling you,
Yep.
As much as I respect everybody on both sides of the aisle and their commitment to public service, I will tell you that if the Democrats controlled the House and the Democrats controlled the Florida Senate and the executive branch and it leaned left in the judiciary, we would not be throwing money hand over fist to agricultural issues in the center of the state. I'm sorry, we wouldn't. Okay?
I know that this is
So
probably,
you're saying, wait. You're saying that actually is a real partisan issue.
It's a partisan issue in the sense that it's not even so much partisan, it's where it touches. Do you remember when we had the algal bloom off Lake Okeechobee and all this?
Yeah.
Wait a second, they're really big yachts that now have green sludge around them. And now everyone all of a sudden took it seriously. And
Well,
again,
the rich people.
when it hits you, it does. And one of the things that I sort of espouse, because I have some people on the other side of the aisle that believe in this and we work towards it, we should be able to agree about 85% of things. And what I mean by that is, the weather is ecumenical to whose house it destructs and whose car it ruins. And it's just a question of whether or not you want to. Now, as you saw after this past week, the Democrats took a shellacking in Miami-Dade County, and yet those problems still persist. It's not like the change in party has now changed Mother Nature. Those conditions will persist. And listen, the longer actually it's embedded with one side, it's more of their problem. They have to own it. But I think that we should be able to agree on 85% of stuff.
I would say that too, that when we talk policy and we talk about things and we get rid of the labels and we get rid of the color war teams, that it's amazing how many things we actually do agree on. It's true.
I also think that there is something to be said for why we're so divided. Obviously, Trump was a lightning rod, but that was used more so by the corporate media as a means of getting ratings. I think when you get down to where the real problems lie, kind of like at the local level and even the state level, is wedge issues is what separates people. Yeah, you're not going to convince somebody that's pro-life to be pro-choice and vice versa. You're not going to convince somebody that they need to have certain restrictions on their Second Amendment rights, especially in this state where the NRA is king. And then you have issues with whether or not, who depends on which side of the aisle you're on. It doesn't matter when it comes to developer money, because both parties are completely guilty of, being overly funded by, rich land developers. And, again, for a state that is almost
except this guy.
Except this guy. Well, that's why you're here.
Well, no, I mean, in full disclosure,
Yeah.
I grew up as the son of a developer, except
Yeah.
we did things a little different. We built a lot of affordable housing.
Right.
My dad said, we're never going to build something where you can say that's where the poor kids live and that's where the rich kids live.
Right.
I mean, there's a way. And when I came down here, and much to my surprise, they don't do it like they do it in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, where you have mixed incomes inside of the same project, where cops, teachers, and firemen can actually live in the city where they work. We don't do that. We give everybody a 2-hour commute with terrible transportation. But to your point,
you and you and I are Jerseyites, and Jen is a lifelong Floridian. The one thing that I try to explain to people where we come from, labor has a seat at the table. Labor really does not have a seat at the table in this state, and that's a very big problem. When you're a right to work state, as a lot of when Jen was running for Congress, and we were meeting with the union heads about potential endorsements, they said, look, this is collective begging. This is not collective bargaining, and not being able to kind of put the kibosh on a lot of the problems like you were alluding to. And that, I guess, in a way is, kind of gets to the point that I was looking for, which is who essentially makes these decisions, or who is getting the green light? Is this city commission, county commission, when it comes to, like you said, in Sunny Isles, the skyscrapers to,
it's so overdeveloped. It is,
Yeah.
there is ridiculous amounts of overdevelopment in proportion to the infrastructure.
Okay. In relation to the infrastructure, yeah, the pace of development has the volume of development has far outpaced the existing infrastructure. However, when I said it wasn't a pleasantry or platitude when I said I serve in the most diverse district, I do. Like, you can have a nice single family home in certain areas of my district, or live on the 45th floor. And a lot of that is by design. We have a lot of wealthy Russians in Sunny Isles that want to be way up in the sky, and we have a building you can pull your car into, and the car goes up.
We've seen it. We've seen it.
Right? But then we have duplexes and multifamilies, and side by sides and all. We have every variation of it, and for some people, they love that high density thing. It's that's their thing, and there's people that really obviously like single family detached space and privacy. So to your point, I mean, yeah, we have the diversity, but the affordability aspect of it obviously is ridiculous. So you're asking me what's the genesis of decision making, or?
Yeah, where do you draw the line? Like, it seems like, especially with all the issues that we have, Jen's talked about this a lot on the campaign trail about, where we sit when it comes to our, water levels. And then, of course, they just don't stop building. I mean, it's definitely more detrimental from what I've seen in Miami-Dade than it is in Broward, but it's still bad in both places. I mean, it just seems like construction just doesn't end. And I'm wondering if there's a breaking point, so to speak, and everyone's living on top of each other.
Okay, so I am not what you would call a democratic socialist. Okay, I believe in the market. I think the market has a way of working itself out. I'm going to give you a perfect example. There comes a point where I was living in North Miami Beach up until earlier this year. Okay, and my homeowner's insurance went from X to double to 2X.
Yeah,
I've never had a claim. I've never had a problem. No, in 20 plus years as a homeowner, whatever, in various places, but with the same insurance company, never had an issue. But that became like cost prohibitive. I could afford it, but it was like, just with the property taxes I was paying and the homeowner's insurance, which I could have bought a car with. I mean, it was so ridiculous, right? That becomes sort of cost prohibitive. Now, what do we have to do when the whole entire neighborhood starts getting those premium notices and estimates and says, wait a second, we can't afford this, especially in a downturn, much less a pandemic, and we're out of here. And then you start having price resistance and things start lowering, and then the assessed values of things lower because they're not as desirable. Okay, I was in a nice home in North Miami Beach, not a palatial mansion, okay, but my property taxes were $46,000 a year. My homeowner's insurance went up to $25,000 a year. Okay. Wow. And the neighbors started doing the same thing without any kind of incident, with no flooding, here's the problem, is pretty soon your local elected officials start hearing from people saying, what is this? We need to cut down on services. We need to cut down on this. And then they start triaging the dollars from property taxes. That becomes a rather ecumenical problem and not partisan. So when you ask them, like, who pulls the trigger on certain things, that people just can't afford that. And if we didn't have like a 2-income house, if we didn't have tremendous resources and all that stuff, never would have been able to afford it. And we saw people just selling left and right. Now you have people coming from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the Midwest, fleeing areas that had COVID problems and high taxation to come to Florida because there is no income tax. Home sales have been gangbusters in Florida this past year. I don't know if you guys realize that. They've been
yes, I do.
Like amazing. So today I'm actually in Orlando because they gave me the Defender of Home Rule Award, which I was flattered. But
we were going to bring that up, and congratulations.
Thanks. But everyone's talking about like budget shortfalls and all that stuff. So the Sadowski Affordable Housing Fund in Florida is funded by doc stamps, which happen on the filing of mortgage notes and the sale of homes. Okay, and the sale of property. They're called documentary stamps. And a small portion of each and every single sales transaction in Florida, they collect part of those doc stamps that send it to a fund in the state, which forms a Sadowski Trust Fund for affordable housing. Well, guess what? Everyone's like, oh, budget shortfalls. They're going to raid the Sadowski Fund against this year. Guess which fund is going to be the most well-funded of any of the revenue funds in the state of Florida this year? The Sadowski Fund.
Yeah.
And it's sort of ironic. So I explained to people, about the home sales. Well, that equals how much money we have for affordable housing. Every single person, it's sickening because I grew up in the business to hear everybody in every campaign stop talk about affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing. And then I get some of my colleagues that come to me and they go, listen, I've been using it on the campaign trail. I got elected. Can you explain to me what the hell it is? And that's okay. It's honest, right?
Yes.
So people really need to understand what that means. You have one spectrum that thinks that's like Section 8, fully government subsidized. And then there's other people that realize, wait, I'm like 60% of the, adjusted median income for the area. And I can't possibly afford my rent if I'm just so it's a whole explanation of things. Sorry, we can go on forever on that.
No, we're definitely a very unique state. I think that's one of the reasons why Tallahassee is, a lot of people think it's dysfunctional. And of course, there's a lot of, things that either, don't get done or the things that get done are not what everybody wants. We're definitely, I don't consider myself a socialist. I do think, however, that there has to be elements of socialism more so incorporated into our daily lives that are not there as of right now, especially in a state like this.
Like what?
Well, obviously, I support Medicare for all. I think that we've gotten to the point now where, it's painfully obvious that
you support healthcare for all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the concept of Medicare for all.
Single payer.
Yeah. There's two different formats for Medicare for all. There's a great gentleman by the name of Cliff Easterman who's based in Coral Springs. He can really explain it very well. But essentially, what you're looking at with Medicare for all, and it could be done at the state level. There's enough residents in the state to do it. So essentially, one line of it would have socialized medicine, which means you would completely wipe out all private insurance, and everyone would have Medicare. And then the other option is to have, essentially, we would flip what we have right now. We would have a public system with a private option, meaning you could buy private supplemental insurance for certain things that you may need. But the basic needs like 1 to 2 doctor visits a year, you have an emergency, you have to go to the hospital, you need prescription drug medication, all that stuff would fall under the hub of the, you would say.
We want to eliminate the profit motive. We don't need a private insurance person in between us and our doctor. We don't need it. Every other country has figured this out. Like to me, it's just absurd that we're still having this discussion and there's people that don't have healthcare and that people have to be stuck in jobs that they don't like because they're scared of losing their insurance. And the fact that insurance is tied to employment and now everybody's unemployed. And this is ludicrous. And
I also don't think that we're not in the business of trying to, one of the concerns that a lot of people have when they think that we're moving too close to, socialism or even communism in some respects, is we're so close to Cuba. So everybody gets so concerned about, are we drifting a little too far in that direction? Yeah. My main concern is, and this is from a capitalist perspective, what are you bringing to the table that's actually improving healthcare outcomes? Private insurance, for-profit middlemen are not doing that. We're not in the business of telling a doctor, you're making too much money, so we need to cap you at, $200,000 a year. If you're a great doctor who's in Coral Gables and you've got a list of it's like 3 months waiting period to come and see you, that's your business. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. But the idea that
are you going to cap them from how much they can charge because they're so good at their job? Yes.
Well, again,
yes,
that comes back to the free market, and that's a good point. Which is, if the market can bear it and they're the best at their job, you're not trying to stop them from making a living. And let's face it, all too often, what they're charging in conjunction with what the private insurance company is charging, you can't even see it. It's so small. The idea that 1/3. Yeah. So, well, 1/3 of the money that we put into healthcare in the United States goes into somebody's pocket as profit. If you ask me, that to me is something I don't agree with. But I'd love to hear your opinion as to where you would stand as far as some form of a Medicare or a universal healthcare system. What you would think would be a good way to go.
So, a couple salient points that you have to recognize: the people that you're asking to advocate for these things or get on board all have free healthcare provided by the taxpayers. I just want to be clear. I think we would move the needle on healthcare discussions if you took away all of elected officials' healthcare.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That would move the needle, and we'd find something affordable and probably more widespread. But as it stands, I pay a de minimis amount every month to cover myself, my wife, and my 2 kids. Okay. And I'm a little strange in the situation that I'm just waiting for the day that I drop dead, because I have not gotten a physical, I don't think, in 15 years. All right. But, and I'm unique in that situation, I don't really take advantage of the whole thing. But again, whether you're talking about United States Congress, United States Senate, presidents, whatever, Trump's like, COVID's nothing, it's wonderful. Of course it is, because you had a team of 100 doctors, okay, taking care of you. Okay. Now, if you scale that out to the 1 million people that have, you follow what I'm saying. Yes. However, I cannot advocate for any type of system. I'll give you a very simple example why not. Any type of system where you're capping somebody's ability to do well and succeed. And everyone's idea of success, everyone's idea of how to live well, when Jen was talking about, it's like, Dubai on the beach over there in Sunny Isles, it's so overbuilt. Some people love that sterile, completely sterile kind of feeling. But this is the example I give, because I was taught this example, I think, when I was 15 as it relates to socialism. When I was 16, I went to go live in Beijing, China by myself. Okay. So I lived truly in the communist state, 3 years removed from Tiananmen Square. I was total immersion. I learned Mandarin, when you start dreaming in the language, you start learning it. And I spent a lot of time in Europe, year and a half in Italy, going through North Africa and into other parts of Africa, a lot of time in South America. So I've been in 86 countries, probably 6 years of my life collectively have been outside of the United States. I go back to poker. Should you put a cap on how much somebody can win if they're so wonderful at their job or at their profession? Do you want to put a cap on the ability for people to earn? And that's really gets to the heart of what triggers people some deep-rooted feeling about this idea of America and the American dream, which is, don't put a ceiling on me. Don't put a limit on me. Don't put a leash on me. I came here. Very often people came here by raft, by plane, by boat, by some means. And all they want, even if it's not really conceivable and attainable that everyone's going to be a multimillionaire, they still want the idea and they still want the opportunity to seek happiness in some profession, not all of which are chasing a buck, okay? But not all of which are, incredibly noble pursuits. But just don't ever tell me what my limits are. And corporations, take that sort of, I don't want to say bad rap for it, but Florida is not a collection of huge corporations. When Apple comes to my office and they're like, we're interested in investment in Florida. How many people do you have working here? Like, 4,600. I go, let me guess, 4,400 work in stores and they're really just part-time employees. Like, yeah. But actually, footprint here, we don't have Fortune 500 here. We really don't. We have their CEOs, that want to live here because they pay taxes. But we're small businesses. We're mom and pops. We're restaurants. I see it in my district. The places that have gone out, the salons and barbershops and restaurants and daycare centers that have gone out of business. Now, they're not going to probably make $100 million. They're not going to have windfall profits, but they don't want you to. They don't want you to tell them what they can and can't make. And that's what resonates with the too broad monolithic message we're hearing about in this postmortem of the Democratic Party's performance this past week, which is, please note the difference between Nicaraguans, Costa Ricans, Hondurans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, all with different stories, all with different issues. The 18 to 29 crowd that came out in wildly huge, wonderful numbers had grandma and grandpa growing up. They can't define or articulate what socialism is, but they remember hearing how bad it was. And then when they hear something on the radio, whatever, it permeates. I can't, so just for full disclaimer, I can't sign up or subscribe to anything that puts a limit on anyone's ambition, however realistic or unrealistic.
Would you be willing? Would you be willing to consider the prospect of the Medicare for All system that permits a private option and no cap on, doctors' ability to make a living?
When you said you wanted to flip it around and make it basically a Medicare for all with a private option, we now have the private option, the stopgap filler to fill in the void. Let me put it this way. My two 14-year-old identical twin boys do not have to want or worry about where their next meal is coming from, whether they're going to lay their head on clean sheets, and if they break a bone, which they often do, or something goes wrong, that they or I have to worry about their well-being and getting the best medical care. And I don't think that should be based entirely on the womb they were lucky enough to be born from. Okay? So if a 5-year-old gets sick, more importantly, my father said that my father is pure capitalist, center-right kind of guy, NPA, registered, whatever. But he thinks the greatest travesty in the world, or seeing some of the older couples in the poor neighborhood he grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, and Lyndhurst, working their whole life, law-abiding, doing, husband in the military service, mother wet nursing for the neighborhood, doing everything they possibly could. And then someone gets cancer when they're 70 and gets wiped out. That's not okay. And you know what? We can meet the other side or the disagreeing, disapproving parties. We can meet them there with those even anecdotes, with those stories. But when you frame it in the sense of like, we're now going to put a cap and put everybody in a box, they're going to freak out. Even if you ever try to get your grandmother into a new car, okay? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Come on, Nanny, just have a seat. Just try it. You're going to love it. And
I like the car I've been in for the past 20 years. Don't try to get me to change.
Do you think 80-year-old U.S. senators are any freaking different?
Which is why we need to get rid of 80-year-old friggin' senators.
Well, you know what? And I got to tell you, Senator Feinstein put out a message today that it's like it just so reflected the fact that she's so past the expiration date, if you will, in terms of being able to represent the average person in this country. And that, in a lot of ways, is really where we are. And that's kind of why we call, one of the big reasons we call the show Generational Change is because we are, there is sort of this, there are new voices, new blood that's coming up. And I also think part of the reason why socialism, and you could see this probably in any time in history, we are a desperate country right now. There are people who cannot afford, anything. And when that happens, demagogues like Trump can become very popular. And then you have these ideas of, well, we're just going to give everybody everything for free. And so trying to find that balance is not easy to do. And I definitely agree with you. I would be more inclined to go with the Medicare for All system that allows for the private option, which allows for you to buy supplemental insurance. And yes, it permits for, doctors to work within a free market capitalist system that if you're the best at your job and you are capable of making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, whatever it is, if that's what the market bears, and that's what the market bears. This is not, this is not a socialized economy. However, if you are going to tell me that we can remove a component of the healthcare system that is only a drain on our pocketbooks and not actually improving our healthcare outcomes, I think that's something that everybody could come to the table on. You just have to frame it the right way.
We have worse outcomes. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. We spend more and have worse outcomes than other countries that we should be on par with. 100%. I just wanted to let you know that. So I'm a medical family. My husband's a urologist on here. And so that's the hand that feeds me. He's got 4 offices. He covers, I want to say 6 hospitals. I don't know at this point. And so, they're generally not in favor of foregoing any amount of money that could be theirs. They're not. And that's the truth. They're not. But he loves the idea of not having to deal with managed care. He loves the idea of not having to provide insurance for his employees. So he's come to realize. He
loves the idea of not dealing with insurance companies, which are a pain, which is behind the scenes something I work on a lot, because a lot of doctors, like your husband, and one of the, not specifically your husband, or not Dr. Perlman, but another urologist actually in North Dade is terrified of even contacting his insurance company because he's afraid he's going to be dropped to try to renegotiate a contract that he hasn't seen in 10 years and has not been able to renew or renegotiate or whatever. So I listen, I get it. I know that prescription drugs are a hell of a lot more expensive, even when they're made here, than they are across the border. I'm totally with you. But I go back, and I know it sounds corny to say the analogy of trying to get your grandmother into something. It's they sort of have to be shown, or it has to be demonstrated.
Yeah.
And I remember, I've had to go to a hospital in Morocco, in Italy twice, and I remember I'm like, how much I took. My son broke his wrist in Chile, and we left. We're like, how much do we owe you? They're like $10. I'm like, can I at least buy lunch for the staff here? I mean, but that comes in a fixed amount of GDP that comes at the expense of something else. And if you say, this is what I'm looking for when I say we agree on 85%. When 20 Democratic presidential candidates are standing up on the stage and they're arguing over, no, it should be private with a public option, it should be public with a private, it should be a combination of, and it's some permutation of all of the same thing. They're all trying to appeal to whatever poll told them that they should say, and whoever they're trying to appeal to, and who their donors are and all that stuff. I'd just like to flip it around. I would like to ask the question to the other side: do you think we have a healthcare problem? The answer has got to be yes. I mean, objectively, the other side has to say yes. Good. What's your idea on how to fix it? You never notice nobody asks the question, what's your idea on how to fix it, to the other side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't ask. And
that's,
what's not productive? Telling the majority what they should do. Let's ask them.
Yeah.
Shift the burden. We need to start shifting the burden over to those who write the checks or have the power or have the control, so to speak, in the majority. Shift the burden.
And I think and then we'll obviously wrap up in a minute. And of course, that is a very great point, Senator, is the fact that if you're going to be discussing how do we actually change the healthcare system, you have to be talking to the people who actually work in it and live it every day. Very often people are not living it every day and don't understand the machinations that go into it. But I do think if there was a way, as Jen has pointed out, that her husband, as I'm sure probably most people in the medical profession would agree, there is way too much bureaucracy. There's way too much paperwork. If we can cut—
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, if we can cut that out of the equation, the amount of cost saving that would come from that alone would afford us the opportunity probably, or at least get very close to full coverage of the country and be able to give legitimate coverage. We talk about, I have a lot of problems with the ACA, and I think if we can get to that point where we're not just giving everybody coverage, but we're giving them what is the basic human needs from, like I said, a couple of doctor visits a year, emergency protection, all that stuff, prescription drugs. I don't think it's that difficult to get there. I think it's all about how you frame it, building those relationships, and getting away from the extremism. I agree. I would not support socialized medicine. I don't think that's the answer, not in the United States. But we can have a universal healthcare system where you take out the for-profit middleman, and I think universally that would be very popular. So it's just a question now of how we get there. I do want to give the floor to you, to finish up. Let anybody know what you're working on right now, potential plans for the future. And obviously, we're very grateful for you coming on tonight. We're here to inform the local community about who's representing us, who's really looking out for our best interests, and what we could do to help you, because everyone just looks at this as, well, they're my representative. No, if you really want to have effective representation, you also have to be there for your community to help as well.
So I also would like to say, I wish you were my senator, but you're not my senator. I would have voted for you.
I try to listen. The past 7 months, I've been everybody's senator based on unemployment issues and everything that we've been working on.
I mean, I've got Lauren Book, and I'm not singing her praises.
Lauren works very hard and does not seek praise.
I'm sure.
No.
Lauren, I don't follow her too closely, but I know that unfortunately for Lauren, she carries a lot of her father's reputation, and that's not fair. She has a right to distinguish herself as a representative. And if she's doing good work, then we'll definitely look into that as well. And we'd be happy to have her on the show too. Absolutely. So like I said,
works very hard, but does not seek the praise that a lot of other people seek.
Sure.
And doesn't really seek to be awarded for stuff. But let me say this past week, we just found out today that another one of our state senators, Democratic state senators, lost by a handful of votes on a
JJR. Yep.
So we're now actually down one. We were trying to gain some seats, and we actually ended up losing one. The day after the election, I went and taught voluntarily a 7th grade civics class at a local school. And the reason being, civics is so important. I mean, I was with 200 adults today from the League of Cities and asking some pretty basic questions, not their fault, but it's probably our fault, asking who has a cell phone number of their state representative and senator, and less than a third probably raised their hand. Here's what I teach. I teach a bullseye idea. We're too used to the hierarchy, the levels, the linear kind of thing. I teach a bullseye. The most important form of government is in your home, okay? And I joke that, your mom and dad make the rules, interpret it, and enforce them, so it's sort of a dictatorship. But it is the form of government. And then from there, you have your city, you have your county, you have your state, and you have your federal government. So I teach these kids, you've heard everything about Trump and Biden, Trump and Biden, and Trump and Biden. But when you turn your faucet on, when you try to flush your toilet, when the garbage does or does not get picked up, that has nothing to do with President Trump or President-elect Biden, okay? And that's when you start teaching like the responsibilities of who's responsible for what. And in my very diverse district, the bullseye stays the same, but what you need and what you're seeking really derives from different sources, and we need people to get engaged. You can ask a 9-year-old who's running for president, but a 9-year-old's not going to know, unless their mother or father is the mayor, they're not going to know any of their councilmen or city commissioners. And your car's flooding, the constituents have sewage issues. Those are city and county issues, right? Yep. And from there, that is the breeding ground for the state, with the exception of me. The last elected position I had was senior class president in 93 to 94. But that's the breeding ground for the next level of state representatives and county commissioners. And so they're interviewing now. Like, call them out, and put them on check and get them responsible. Some of the areas that you guys have, you have amazing dynamic people that work. I've been in contact with some of your local elected officials at 4:00 in the morning to help people. Okay, I can tell you that specifically.
You
can't say that for other places. So
no, and you've really done a really great job, and
I
know
you have a very good reputation. You have a very good reputation amongst a pool and in an area that most people do not. And that's just, I know that these are your friends, your colleagues, and I get that, but amongst the general populace, you have an extraordinarily better reputation than a lot of the other people do down here.
And I think you see this.
I don't have.
You see this as a term of service.
Like I don't, I'm in this because I want to serve, and I love getting up every morning and doing this. Now,
that's what we talk about. That is what that is what and Gen Core is about. It's about service to the community. If you are, if you see, and again, we don't have to name any elected officials. You know who Jen ran against. You know how a lot of people are down here. A lot of them see it as a career. But if you see it as a career before you see it as a term of service, that in itself is the biggest, the conundrum that exists within the political arena. Like you said, no skeletons. And the fact that you are looking to help that says a lot more about what is considered an anomaly in politics than what is considered the norm. And we're very grateful that you are doing what you're doing, because we do need better examples. And that's why we want to have as many local officials as possible, because I think it's more important for people to be informed. The impact, as you saw today with JJR, is it's not that your vote for Trump or Biden isn't important. It certainly is. But the impact of your vote is significantly less than it is for your state representative, your state senator, your city commissioner. That's really where you can have a tremendous impact at the local level. And without obviously diving too deep into, what happened with JJR, obviously, it was terrible what did happen. But there is one question that I do want to bring up before we finish up.
Sure.
A great young man, Logan Rubenstein, who helps.
I know his question.
Yeah, he's good. Always a good man. Okay. So obviously this, we have these issues that come up on both sides of the aisle. But of course, DeSantis puts the bill out there about increasing the scope of Stand Your Ground, which is like, to me, it's like, it's getting to the point of lunacy at this point. But obviously, we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
On what's everybody talking about?
So this is kind of sums up my style of service. I've declined 11 interviews in the past 24 hours on this issue, including 2 national interviews, because I expect to be on the Criminal Justice Committee again next session.
Right.
And the award I got today was not because I championed so many great bills, but because I killed a lot of bad ones.
Yeah.
that would have been detrimental to locations. So I'm going to leave it at that and not make a public comment about that proposed legislation.
Respectfully.
But I would challenge any of my 159 colleagues about their understanding of criminal justice and criminal procedure better than me.
Can we agree?
I'll leave it there.
Can we agree that we need to eliminate for-profit prisons in the state of Florida? Can you agree on that? Because I think one thing we can do from a criminal justice standpoint is just make sure that if we're going to move the needle more so to where, long-term incarceration and things like that, I have no problem with, anyone who thinks that tough on crime is a necessity. But I also think that the for-profit component in certain industries, whether it be healthcare, education, and of course corrections, I think that's where a lot of the issues stem from. And maybe without for-profit prisons, maybe there would be less of a heightened sense of the problems that exist in the state of Florida, and maybe we wouldn't need to be looking at stand your ground laws where we could be probably having less of a crime issue. What do you think about that as we wrap up?
So I had some deeply held beliefs and positions before I got elected and went and visited a dozen prisons.
Are you muted?
And no, she's not muted. Now she's muted. No, and I had some deeply held beliefs. And when I got questionnaires from groups, I would say, yeah, it's terrible. And I would counsel with my dad and mom and be like, they'd be like, what's the problem? We have wonderful charter schools in New Jersey. What's the problem? I go, yeah, but they're not for profit in Newark, New Jersey. They're for profit in Florida. And the prisons, the private prisons, it's, privatization can make things more efficiently and all that stuff. Yeah, but it goes against sort of the ethos of, well, now you have a profit model that's based on per capita. So the intention is to drive people. And then I became a prosecutor. And, you would think, well, those who we prosecute becomes the feeding ground, so to speak, to who's going to go in those places. And yet I'm going to tell you this, in all honesty, and you always know where you stand with me. If I was sentenced to state prison in Florida, I would not want to go to a public facility. I would go to one of the privates. And the reason why I know this is because I inspect the HVAC systems, how many teachers they have per 100 inmates, how recent the law books are in the library of these places. And the idea and the ethos, the concept behind a private prison system, I'm with you, right? I've never taken $1 of prison money, okay? But the actual physical plant and facilities are nicer. And I've been to a lot of prisons and county jails. Remember, I was the only one that passed criminal justice bill last session. And the session before that was providing feminine hygiene products to female inmates. And this year passing anti-shackling and solitary confinement, to come to find out that the same Broward facility had a woman give birth basically in a jail cell without medical care.
Tammy Jackson, I knew her.
And she died.
And
we
have issues.
Right.
Yeah, she did.
That was my bill in the Senate, and it was the last bill to pass, the only criminal justice bill to pass this year. So it was a very uncomfortable conversation for Sheriff Tony and I on the phone, and he ended up firing his colonel and his number 2. The county jail facilities are awful.
Yeah,
are absolutely awful. And I'm telling you, if the physical plant and structure of a couple of the private ones that I've been to are a hell of a lot nicer. So I will agree with you in theory. We should not privatize any of these public services at all. Okay, I'm with you on that, but they're absolute crap. Some of the public county facilities.
That's a separate issue, right? I mean, that's a separate issue as to what we should do about that.
Right.
I just think we cannot have a profit motive for per head incarceration. I think it is an appearance of impropriety, even if it weren't one. It's just not okay.
And I think you bring up a good point that there is so much inhumanity in corrections, and especially at the state level. It's almost like we want to just toss them aside, let them rot in there. They shouldn't even, have anything to begin with. And like you said, the fact that you had to put forward a bill for feminine hygiene products in women's prisons is like.
But let me just end with this.
Sure.
I consider myself a criminal justice champion, so to speak, and there's nobody that puts forth more effort and more time towards reforming the prison situation, pissed off about how few teachers there are and the lack of funding and the things that they need, and compassionate conditional release for inmates for nonviolent crimes than a Republican senator named Jeff Brandes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's more of a libertarian than a Republican, but nobody, I mean, I I'm second fiddle to how hard he works, how many prisons he visits, and he's the head of the appropriations committee.
I was actually going to ask you about a compassionate release.
Yeah.
Something we could possibly do on that. And my friend Teresa Williams and I were talking about that, and that's something that we would love to do. So I don't know if that's something that is just like
the governor of the state of Florida, folks, has never visited a prison. Never once.
Yeah.
I think you've been extremely informative. You don't talk, you do not talk like a politician, which is good. You talk like a public servant, and that's
why we like you.
Yeah. And you were 100% transparent. And no, we're not going to agree on everything. But you know what? Jen and I point this out all the time. Libertarians and progressives can be diametrically opposed on a lot of issues, but they can find common ground on a lot of issues too. We need to be finding ways to agree and not reasons to disagree. And I think if we had more elected officials like you, we would find ourselves agreeing a lot more than we don't. Yeah. And with that said, Jason, plug whatever you want to plug. We'll put it in the chat right now. If you have a website, social media, anything you would like us to put out there for you.
Yeah, I answer all of them and read all of them. So I think it's SENPIZZO on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. We'll answer it. Sometimes not right away, but we answer everything. We don't have like Twitter teams and stuff like that. It's just, I assume responsibility for everything, good or bad.
That's awesome.
We look forward to having you again. I'm sure that obviously 2022 is not that far away. We'll see what happens for both of you potentially, but obviously in the meantime, we're grateful that you came on, and obviously we hope to have some solution to this flooding issue, among other things. But we certainly hope to have you on again. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.